Sunny, how are you
Hello,
doing?
how are you?
I'm good. So good to see you here.
Yeah,
A big
likewise.
wet
I know we've
welcome.
chatted a few times on Clubhouse, but I think it's the first time we're actually seeing each other.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see you finally.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think this is also a treat for the Global Jain Network audience. I think most of them know me as a voice behind the Clubhouse account, so I think it's great for them
Mhm.
to get to hear us as well.
Absolutely, and it's the honor's all mine. I'm so glad that you're here today and you took out the time for this. So great. I would like to introduce you first, and then you can go ahead and describe yourself further. So
Absolutely.
Sunny Jain is the founder of the Global Jain Network, which is one of the biggest and widest network of Jains that exist with respect to veganism and animal rights. So that's he's an amazing, fantastic, and eloquent speaker. So Sunny, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself further?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. And, I see a few joining in. A little bit about myself. My name is Sunny Jain, based here in Houston, Texas. We started the Global Jain Network about 4 months ago. We started as a small group of friends. And, over time, we started having these incredible events. And we started to grow and grow, and now we're, currently one of the largest global Jain networks, like you said, in terms of animal rights, in terms of veganism. And just so grateful for everything that's happened so far.
Absolutely. And I think the pleasure is for each and everybody who's part of your entire team with respect to even the boards and the people who are the members. So great. Why don't you go ahead and share a little more about your journey into activism stuff, how you got inspired to, be an activist for the animals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up as a Jain, and one thing about Jainism is, we grow up as vegetarians, and we've grown up with the belief that every animal has a soul, every being has a soul, and so I've always grown up with like a compassion for animals. It wasn't until about 5 years ago when I watched a few documentaries about what happens in the dairy industry, and for me it was almost like almost like epiphany that I didn't realize what was happening in the dairy industry and how cows were being treated in the and how almost like dairy is directly related to these slaughterhouses. And so I eventually made the transition to go vegan, and as with me, my family also joined as well. So my mom became vegan, my dad became vegan, my sister became vegan, and so we became like this vegan family at home. And really, I think it's partly due to my Jain beliefs is how I made that transition to veganism. And I think there's a lot of overlap.
Absolutely. And I think it just blends into the idea of how religions and community themselves can manifest into the idea of animal rights and how everything is just so beautifully interlinked. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little more about what, I mean, I remember having a discussion with you about prayer for compassion itself on Clubhouse, right? So
Yeah.
I also remember you mentioning a particular scene. So if you'd like to talk about that.
Prayer for Compassion is a documentary that walks the audience through various different religious communities. And essentially, there's vegan and animal welfare groups that are popping up in every religion. So whether it's Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Jainism, essentially there's people of religious belief that are starting to realize that, hey, there's a need for these conversations within our religious spaces. And I think the Jain Vegan Initiative, the Global Jain Network, is just one kind of group that is using religion to have these conversations. I often have this conversation with others that we believe that if you're from the same community, we have a higher probability of really changing minds, right? And I think a great example is if I go to like a hunter convention, right, like a Southern white hunter convention, and I try to preach veganism, I probably wouldn't have much success, right? They'll look at me like, who's this guy, But if a hunter that turned vegan actually goes to this convention and he talks to his community, he might have a better probability, right? So people would be like, okay, I know him, we grew up together, and now he's speaking about veganism. Maybe there's something there. And so that's kind
Right.
of like our philosophy when it comes to, the conversation within the Jain community. We believe that as Jains, if we speak to other Jains about veganism, we have an opportunity to have these like very tailored conversations, right? So we can talk about Jain Durham and like the scripture, tie that into veganism. We can, go to like the Jain temples, and we'll have a space there, right? So if we have like targeted activism, we can aim at a specific audience and try to change the dialogue there. And, I think in the greater scheme of things, we're just one small movement in the greater picture to try to push that needle. And so, I think these conversations are happening everywhere, and we just want to do our part, at least with the Jain community, and start pushing that conversation as well.
And again, just a correction, don't ever say that it's a small initiative. 13K Jains, no small initiative at all. I think that's brilliant. So really glad that you started this network because it helps, pushing the movement further. Yeah. So, okay. Give me a little more idea about how faith ties into animal rights, the concept of animal rights.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Jainism, there's multiple pillars and tenets that are really what we would consider every Jain has. And I think one of the biggest tenets is ahimsa. And in Jainism, when we talk about ahimsa, we talk about it through our mind, our action, and our words. And so, we don't want to inflict violence through our minds. We don't want to inflict violence through our actions, and even how we talk to others. And so when we talk about, what's on our plate, most Jains are vegetarian, by default. And so it's based on the idea that every animal has a soul. And when we eat meat, we're essentially causing this unnecessary violence. And I think, similarly with veganism, I think right now there's a lot of information that's being shared about what's happening in the dairy industry. And we're starting to learn that dairy is very much just as violent as meat. Dairy is taking from the animal before it's slaughtered, and then meat is taking from the animal after they're slaughtered, right? And so essentially it's the same industry, it's the same, everything's the same. And in fact, there's I've heard that there's pretty much like a truck that takes cows from the dairy industry and then drives them to the slaughterhouse, right? And it just goes back and forth. And so I think it's our duty to start asking these questions, like, what are we eating? And, how does this tie into our religion? And I can tell you that, most Jains that are vegan, they went vegan because of their Jain beliefs that led them to veganism. And so, I would ask everyone to kind of reflect on that and try to think about how we can do better, as the Jain community when it comes to animal welfare.
Absolutely. And I think ever since I was a kid, I've always been taught that Jainism is one of the most compassionate religions that exist as such, right? Mm-hmm. So just want to ask a quick question about how did you start breaking the taboo, or what kind of challenges did you face when sometimes, oftentimes we get this kind of excuse that, culture and tradition justifies the idea of exploiting animals, right? Especially with respect to the rituals that exist. So how do you go about breaking this sort of myth that people have?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a common conversation. I think when we talk about dairy in particular, I think dairy is so much tied to our identity as Indians. And, when I talk to someone about, the need to give up dairy, many people grew up with cows, right? And, you might hear this often that, oh yeah, cows were like our family members, we treat them so well. But, you ask the follow-up question, like, where did the cow come from and where did it go after, right? What happened to the male cows? Were the calves separated from the mother cows? And you start going deeper and deeper into these questions, and you start realizing that even in these specific scenarios that there is violence and there's exploitation as well. And so I think when it comes to culture, I think every religious community and cultural community in general, there's a need for modernization, for progression, for development. And, every religion will evolve because the world is evolving as well. The world today isn't what it was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And as the world evolves, we have to ask ourselves, how can we be better as a community as well? At our Jain temples, we use so much dairy, right? So we serve dairy in our pujas. We use so much milk, and we use ghee for diyas. And it was a point where I would go to my temple, and there was nothing for me to eat there because everything was just full of dairy. And so that was really one of the inspirations for creating this initiative. That we believe that the fundamental principles. There's a severe disconnect between the fundamental principles and how it's being practiced today. And we want to begin to open these conversations back up and ask, why are we doing this? Can we do it this way as well? And I think similarly, there's Jains around the world that are having these conversations as well. There's a Jain temple that recently turned fully vegan in California. And that was like, I think that was the biggest news for all of us, which shows that we have a chance as well to make a difference. And so,
Congratulations.
we're hoping that we can create a community where, our next generation, our future kids can go to like a Jain temple, and we're talking about veganism, not vegetarianism.
Absolutely. And congratulations. That is a fantastic achievement with like an entire temple going vegan. Wow. I am truly inspired by that. Okay. If there are any particular scriptures within Jainism that you want to refer back to, or any cultural, that exists in the scriptures that, promote the idea of veganism, could you educate a little more me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very interesting space. Within our team, we have a professor of Jain studies, and he was gracious to provide us like this long list of various scripture lines which talk about condoning dairy within the Jain agams. And so this is something that a lot of people don't know. One thing about Jainism, it never promotes dairy. It never says that you have to consume dairy. Rather, Jainism is a religion about constraint. It talks about how we should try to constrain our desires, and find ways where we can limit the violence that we enact on other living beings. And this is a common theme throughout Jainism. And so within the scripture itself, there's multiple areas that talk about that. Another interesting conversation is within Jainism, we essentially measure the intensity of karma by the number of senses a living being has. And so, for example, killing a cow would cause more karma, like more bad karma, than killing a bug, for example, because a bug would have like 2 or 3 senses and a cow would have 5 senses, right? And then killing a bug would cause more bad karma than killing a plant, for example. And so even when we look at, like that hierarchy of how karma is identified, you look at, we avoid root vegetables, right? For in the name of, ahimsa. And it's a little bit more of a complex explanation, but in general, it's, fundamentally behind the name of ahimsa. And so we're avoiding root vegetables in our diet, but we're consuming dairy that causes harm to 5 sense beings. And so even there's like a disconnect, right? Like, how can we hurt a cow while we're trying to avoid root vegetables as well? And so, when we make these smaller connections, there's a lot of evidence within our Jain scripture that would tell us that we should avoid dairy, whether, it was okay 100 years ago. And, there's like a divide there. In my opinion, I don't think it was ever okay to take from an animal, but it's definitely not okay now, given the circumstances and the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay. Have you ever got this argument that it's justified by culture to be consuming or, as an excuse to be harming animals? So how do you tackle that particular argument?
Yeah. And one thing I'll just share for those that are kind of new in the space, so there's a idea called cognitive dissonance, right? And essentially what that means is, in our human mind, it's impossible for us to have 2 conflicting ideas at the same time, which leads us to kind of make these, these rationalizations and these justifications. And sometimes it sounds absurd, right? And, for example, if I tell you that, dairy causes violence to cows, in your mind, you obviously don't want to cause violence to cows, right? That's that's a horrific thing. No one wants to actually cause violence. And so what we would say is, oh, but we need it for protein, right? And it makes no sense, but we have to use something in our mind to justify it. And I think and this is kind of like just my philosophy on it, I think one goal of activism is to dismantle this cognitive dissonance. So oftentimes we're walking through this conversation with them that, oh, so you need protein from the dairy. What if I told you that, that you could get protein from plant-based sources, right? And what about this? What about that? What if dairy is unhealthy for you, right? There's a lot of evidence now that it's not good for the human body. And then, then suddenly that kind of rationalization diminishes, right? So then you might come up with another rationalization that, oh, it's in our culture though, right? That we're doing more good than bad. And then you walk them through that as well. And essentially, I think our goal is to eventually walk them through this conversation where they're dismantling their mind that, okay, maybe, he or she is right, that we should try to, abstain from dairy for these reasons. And so every conversation is kind of like that. And so, appeal to culture is a very common conversation that we have, that what will happen to the dairy farmers, because suddenly we're economists, we want to help, it's something that we'll go into anything and everything to try to justify our use of dairy. And When it comes to culture, I think it's important to realize that just because we did it 100 years ago, or for so many years, it doesn't make it okay, right? There's so many other things in humanity. We've engaged in in racism and sexism. We had a caste system, right? Violence was okay, many years ago. And so just because we did it many years ago doesn't mean it's still okay. We should be, talking about as humans how we can change the way we're doing things so that we are doing what we did, hundreds of years ago, because it was never okay.
Absolutely. And that is so well said. And just like how you brought about the existence of various other oppressions even within the human animal realm, right? There's speciesism, which falls into why animal abuse is justified. So what are your thoughts about speciesism?
Yeah, I love the concept. This is actually a concept that I was introduced to through Clubhouse, like through these conversations. And one thing I realized right away is speciesism is something that is like built into our system. I mean, it's so deeply rooted. It's even within our language. Even myself, I'll catch myself many times like referring to an animal as like an it rather than he, she, or they. And I feel awful because like sometimes I don't even realize that I'm speaking to an animal in that way. But then you realize that it's just so inbuilt in our culture, in our language, and everything we do. And so the idea of and I would love to hear your thoughts as well. But the idea of speciesism is or anti-speciesism, essentially, as humans, we are also animals, and nothing about humans makes us better than animals, right? If you look at any feature of a human, there's probably an animal that has that feature, if not better. And even if not, we shouldn't think of ourselves as superior to another living being. And within Jainism, there's also a lot of interesting kind of like connections that we made after learning about speciesism. We believe that every living being has a soul, and we are all equal in that sense, right? So right now I'm born as a human, and it's considered like a great opportunity and a blessing within Jainism to be born as a human, because it's an opportunity to follow like our religion, our dharma, to spread positivity to others, because we have that opportunity. But in my last life, I could have been something else, right? I could have been an animal, I could have been anything else. And that it's the same soul and just a different physical body. And so when we look at another animal, we shouldn't look at ourselves as superior, because even within Jainism, we're all the same essence, the same soul, just this different physical body. And I heard like a monk actually say this, which I loved a lot. But this monk said that we should treat all animals and all living beings with this compassion, because that animal could very well be our next like spiritual leader in the next life. And so even in that like idea, like we should treat every animal with respect. And with that idea, now we look at what we're doing to cows, right? Are we really treating that cow with compassion and with respect? Cows go, whether in North America or in India, cows go through a horrific life. They are tortured from start to finish. Their lifespans are cut by like 80 to 90%. Male cows are slaughtered within a few months to a year. And this is once again in India as well as in North America. And then female cows, they go through this process of artificial reproduction. They are separated from their calves, and then they're slaughtered as soon as they're spent, and they're not able to make milk as well. And so if I'm thinking about how these living beings could be reincarnated in their next life as a spiritual leader, I think it's no way we can treat an animal.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And yes, that's exactly what speciesism is. It's the idea that there are two facets to speciesism. One of them would be a sense of human superiority, as you mentioned, that humans exclude their animality and see it as differently as savages and wilds. Yeah. And the other facet of speciesism is with respect to interspecie discrimination, like how your instantaneous reaction when you look at a dog is to pet the dog, but when you look at a pig or a cow is to look at them as a quote unquote meat or as a milk reservoir, right? Yeah. So very well said.
And you're absolutely right. And, there's a lot of biases that we have internally. And, this is something that I noticed myself. When I look at an animal like a monkey, for example, right, they have human features, right? They have these facial features. The eyes are, ahead, straight. And so you can see these emotions. But then when we look at a bird, it may be more difficult to see, do they have feelings and how do they feel? And I have a quick story. Here, where I live, there was actually a pigeon, and its wing was, I think, broken, so it wasn't able to fly. And it was in a place where it wouldn't like survive long if it just stayed there. And so my mom actually, took the initiative of bringing it home to us, and we're like, hey, let's keep it within our house for a few days and let's see what happens, right? Because if the pigeon's gonna die, at least we can provide some compassion and provided food and water and air conditioning. And so we lived with this pigeon for a few days, and I remember the pigeon was walking around in my room, and the pigeon actually put its tail next to my foot. And for me, it was such a strange behavior, right? Like, you don't understand like why. First of all, pigeons don't come close to us like that, and it put its tail next to my foot, and essentially the pigeon was showing its way of compassion. And birds have their own ways of showing emotions. Sometimes they'll shake their wings, sometimes they'll do different things that show compassion, which we may not be, it might not be very apparent. And I think that moment made me realize, like, wow, like even this pigeon has compassion, and it's almost like, that pigeon's way of showing thankfulness, right? For feeding it, for being around it, I think the pigeon realized that we're not causing harm and threat. And so I think, just speaking on speciesism, I think all animals have that ability to feel, compassion, to feel pain. They all want to survive. And whether it's a fish, once again, fish have eyes on the side, right? So, it may be difficult, like just from biases, to see that a fish can feel pain as well, but it's all living beings. And so, in the same way, the way we treat dogs and cats, which, we all love, we want to treat cows the exact same way. We want to treat all animals the same way. So that's just one thing I wanted to share about speciesism in general.
And since you mentioned monks, are there any particular spiritual leaders within Jainism that you would recommend for people to look into their teachings?
The question regarding the Jain space and veganism, I think we live in a very it's a very unique space right now. Veganism is being talked about everywhere within the global Jain community, especially here in North America. It's a very common conversation. Within the Jain derasars, which are like the Jain temples, we have a few Jain temples in every major city in North America, and there's many like teachers, Sunday school teachers. There's many like leaders that are vegan within the Jain community, for the very reason of realizing the violence within the dairy industry and realizing that as Jains, we should abstain from products that hurt animals, right? There's a few Jain vegan groups, like grassroots groups that go around and they share awareness and educational material within the Jain community about veganism. I had mentioned there's a Jain temple that went vegan as well. The Jain Center of Southern California, which is like our pride and joy. We're so proud that that entire temple went vegan. We also have like a nonprofit organization known as Jaina, here in North America, which represents all like Jains and Jain derasars. And we regularly have conversations about veganism there as well. And they actually have like a committee known as, the Ahimsak Eco-Vegan Committee. So it's like a committee that talks about veganism within the Jain space. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening about veganism. And, this is like within the last 5 years. So I think it's still a rapidly growing, movement. We have a lot of conventions that they'll serve vegan food like one day of the week or one day of like the 3-day convention. And so I think with time, as we continue to have these conversations, we'll be able to kind of push that needle further and further. Within the religious space, this is something that, we are admittedly having a lot of challenges in. And so, this is in relation to our acharyas, our Jain teachers and leaders within the religious domain. And so there are a few leaders that have mentioned that we should go vegan. So there's multiple videos that are coming out, some Jain sadhus in Hindi, some in English that are speaking about, why we should go vegan. Even the co-founder of Jaina, which is our big nonprofit organization here in America, they actually were vegan for, I think, a good portion of their life as well. And so there's a lot of pockets of conversation happening. And with our organization, so I'm speaking on the Global Jain Network, as well as the Jain Vegan Initiative. Our goal is to strategize our efforts So rather than small pockets of Jains everywhere, we want to be a unified conglomerate where we can talk about veganism in a larger sense. And we want to show our community that this is what we need to do. Every Jain temple should be vegan. All the modern Jain diet shouldn't be avoiding just root vegetables. It should be avoiding dairy as well. In terms of our clothing, we should avoid leather, but we should also avoid silk and wool as well. In terms of lifestyle, we should avoid going to zoos, going to aquariums, going to any events that exploit animals for entertainment, horseback riding, anything that can hurt an animal, we should avoid as well. This is all, I think, it's almost like our imperative within the Jain community that we have to speak up and talk about these things. I don't think this is going away. It's not a fad. It's here to stay, and we hope that others can really help us in making that change, because we need everyone's help in this.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Another question that I have is, how do you think a faith-based activism approach is different than the other forms of activism that exist? How is it unique?
Yeah, a faith-based activist approach, essentially, we have a unique opportunity to go into our scriptures and then to make these unique comparisons to animal welfare and veganism. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of evidence within our religion that we should go vegan. We look back at our religious leaders, and even for thousands of years, there's like evidence that Jains have engaged in animal activism. There's a few major names that have they've spoken to kings, and they've convinced kings to ban animal slaughter, and this is thousands of years ago, right? And so when people say that we shouldn't use religion to justify activism, I'll say it's the very opposite. And even our Tirthankars, our Jain leaders, so many of them have there's so many stories of them saving animals. I think Magar Swami is our main probably our most known Tirthankar, and he was an icon when it comes to animal activism and ahimsa. We have Neminath Bhagwan, Shantinath Bhagwan, and there's a lot of small stories of how our Tirthankars would give up their lives for even the life of a small pigeon as well, right? That we're not greater than any animal like that. And so I think, within the Jain space, I think there's, a conversation to be had. And then, to your question, within the faith-based space, I think, us being in these communities, we have a unique opportunity to make these connections, to speak to those of religious faith and show them that, hey, you can follow your religion and still be vegan.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So are there any unique challenges as such that you've faced within this unique form of activism itself?
Yeah, so I guess, we often say that there's no perfect way of activism, right? And so if there was, we would all do that, right? And so I think different things work for different people. And so, for example, some people are very concerned about their health, right? They want to live a healthy lifestyle. They want to go plant-based. And so when we talk to people like that, often we will start off the conversation with speaking about the health benefits of a vegan diet, right? A plant-based diet. And then we would try to integrate animal rights into it as well. And because, I think, most of us will agree that animal welfare should always be the center of the reason to go vegan. And all these other reasons are just additional benefits or additional ways to get to that.
Absolutely.
And vice versa, right? And I became vegan for animal rights. And I eventually learned that, it's also better for my diet, and it's also helping the environment as well. So while I may have not cared as much about the environment as as others, I realized that my diet was, not negatively impacting diet in terms of what an animal-based diet would. And I could, help the environment as well. So I became more passionate about environment because of veganism. So vice versa, if someone goes vegan for health or someone goes vegan for the environment, we can show them that, hey, in addition to that, you're also helping animals as well. So, and sorry, so to go back to what we had said earlier, different things work for different people. And so for some people, religion, is a very important part of their lifestyle. It affects every decision they make during the day. And if we can make that connection that, our religion says that we shouldn't hurt animals, and with our vegetarian diet, we are hurting animals. There's, substantial evidence. It's at a point where we can't deny that, cows' lifespans are being, cut by so much that they're being tortured in the dairy industry, no matter where you live. And so I think that evidence in 2021 is almost like you can't really argue it. As per a few years ago, it was more like we used to argue and talk about, oh no, what about this, right? So now we know that animals are being hurt, but how can we, what are we going to do about it now? And so the positive about faith-based activism is you can appeal to a very special place in a person's heart, which is religion. You can show pictures and stories of Jain leaders, our religious leaders, and how they've helped animals, and what we should learn from those stories. We can talk about scripture and show direct quotes and lines within scripture that talk about how we should avoid dairy as well. I think conversations are happening everywhere in the world towards veganism. And when the time comes, our goal is to at least get our global Jain community on board, so that when the time comes, everyone is has had their role in this movement. Different things click for different people, and I think we all have an equal opportunity to make a difference. And I'd also say about activism in general, I know for the outside looking in, it sounds like a very strong word, right? Activism sounds like a professional job, right? So people look at it as wow, I can never be an activist, I don't have the knowledge or the experience. Others have often a stereotype of what an activist looks like. And what I would tell you is, even if you just talk to someone about how they should change their diet, I think that is a form of activism, right? I know some people will go on the streets and they'll do activism, which I think is a very effective, method of activism, by the way. So for those that think that it doesn't, make difference, it really much does. There's a lot of evidence that show that, people that hold signs and do these things, they're doing a lot for animals. And so we should never, speak down on them, even if we don't, agree with certain approaches. We don't know what they've done for, what impact they've made, right? So it's always make it a point to not criticize other forms of activism. And I would also say that, it doesn't matter your background, your experience, or knowledge. We all started off not knowing much about animal rights or the environment or the health. And as we continue to be in these spaces and have these conversations, you learn. And, and I think me and Bunch would also say that we both are continuing to learn as well. We're evolving, we're learning, we're adjusting the way we talk to people. And, there's never a bad time to get involved, even if it's just sharing posts. And then eventually evolving to a point where you're comfortable with having these conversations. And then, some people will watch, for me, I had to watch these documentaries to really get knowledge about certain topics. Now I'm at a point where we're having conversations with doctors about veganism, right? And we're standing toe to toe having these conversations, right? And we're able to do so because we've had these conversations, we've messed up, we've done well. And we've over time evolved, and we learned what we needed to learn about how we can communicate with others. And so, and once again, I think we all have an equal role in being a part of this. And, I would just recommend and encourage everyone to just try to get involved, right? And look at activism in a different way. We can all be activists. I think everyone should try to be an activist in their own right, and just be around other like-minded people. And so even if you're around other activists, I think you'll gain that confidence to go out there and speak up, whether it's at a public event or at the dinner table, with some friends.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think for me, I've just had this one belief in my entire lifetime. It's that when with increasing knowledge comes the responsibility to share it. And that's pretty much what I do even with activism, right? That's the entire crux of it. You know the reality of something, so you expose that reality to the others using various forms of activism. So definitely. And there's a question from somebody who says, any documentaries you'd recommend, alongside a lot of other questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll do is I'll write this in the chat as well. We actually created a link tree, which shows all the documentaries divided in different sections. So this includes documentaries on Netflix, on Hulu, on YouTube. And by the way, most of these documentaries are free to access. They're readily available. So you can just go on YouTube and search it and find it. So, for those that are new in the space, right, there's essentially I can maybe say 4 major points within the vegan movement that essentially introduced people to veganism. Veganism is a social justice movement. It is related around animal welfare. So like I never want to like confuse it that it's about anything outside of animal welfare. But there's important conversations within the health space, within the environment space, that talk about how the vegan lifestyle and the diet can help humanity in these spaces. So when it comes to the environment, and I'll just quickly share that we're finding out that the animal agriculture industry causes a lot of damage to our planet. So when we talk about pollution, we talk about climate change, right? We talk about deforestation. We talk about the trees that are being cut down. This is all being significantly progressed by the animal agriculture industry. And so, for example, to create land for animals to grow, for flesh, for meat and dairy, they're actually doing deforestation, and they're cutting down the Amazon rainforest right now. And so, if you remember, in like 2019, there was like a big like story about the Amazon rainforest is on fire, right? And people were outraged, and people were like, "What is going on? How could these countries do that?" If you dig a little bit deeper, you'll see that the reason these forests are on fire is because we're actually clearing out the land so that we can have more cows for beef and for dairy. We also talk about the animals. So cows, when we raise so many cows at so much level, we're causing pollution. We're causing the methane gas going into the environment, and we're causing climate change as well. So within the environment space, short answer is Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy are two documentaries that I would highly recommend. I actually watched Seaspiracy before Cowspiracy, and I think it was just such a well done documentary. And essentially it goes into the idea of different industries and what they are doing to the environment. So Seaspiracy is more related to the fishing industry. We talk about plastic in our oceans. We talk about just how unsustainable these practices are, and we're depleting our oceans. We are, in the pursuit of killing fish, we're also killing dolphins and sharks and whales and all these other animals as byproducts. And like, it's a very like eye-opening documentary. So I think those two documentaries I would highly recommend. Sorry, I'll go a little bit faster. For health, What the Health is a great documentary. Game Changers is an awesome documentary, especially for those that are in the fitness space. There's often a misconception that you can't build muscle on a plant-based diet, and I think the Game Changers just took that idea and flipped it upside down. And it follows like the stories of all these leading athletes in different athletic categories and how they're using a plant-based diet to lead. And then finally, within the animal ethics space, I would recommend. And by the way, you can help me out. I think Dominion is by far that documentary that everyone says that you should look at. You should definitely take a look. I think Unholy Cattle of India is another YouTube video that I would recommend everyone check out. This is a YouTube video which shows how cows are treated in India as well. And I think it's just very important that we have this awareness. And one last thing I say about documentaries is that I know a lot of people are a little bit afraid to go into this because a lot of us are very sensitive to animal cruelty, right? And seeing graphic videos, sometimes it's tough, and I understand that. I was like that once. But I think it's like Bunch said, right? It's our obligation that if we have this knowledge, that we need to share others about it, right? And having watched these videos and these photos, I can speak on myself that if I hadn't watched like a graphic video of what was happening, I wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have become vegan. And I was such a stubborn person, that and it's kind of sad, right? And I'm very admittedly I look back and I regret so much about how I used to be. But I used to be a person where someone told me that, oh, this has eggs in it, right? Like in North America, like cakes and baked goods often has eggs in it, right? And it's a very like common thing here. And if someone said, oh, this cake has eggs in it, like it would ruin my day. I'm like, oh, you messed up this food for me, right? Like that's the kind of person I was. And I don't think anything could have changed me except for watching what is really happening. And sometimes looking at the expressions that animals will make, right, before they're slaughtered. And it isn't like a quick slaughter. It's not a painless slaughter, whether it's organic or whether it's, from a local farm. In every case, the animal will go through pain. And there's oftentimes other animals nearby that are watching the scene happen unfold, right? a cow can actually even like smell the scent of blood, and it will make it feel terror, like afraid. And you know, I think it's important that we have to watch these, at least have an understanding of what is happening. And
Yeah.
once again, different things work for different people, but I think these pictures and these images have a role in our movement, because I wouldn't have one vegan otherwise. So hopefully that kind of answers that question.
It does, it definitely does. So,
Yeah.
just quickly adding on, like you said, Dominion is one of the documentaries that shows exactly what's happening. For people who are in India, please watch Unholy Cattle of India and Deadly Dairy. Both of them are on YouTube and they're like free videos, so you don't have to pay anything. Alongside that, there's a brilliant, brilliant documentary which is called Earthlings that would definitely change your perspective about a lot of things. So please do go watch that as well. Right. So there's somebody who's asking about almond, soy, and other milk alternatives are available in few places, but come with a cost. How about do how about doing raising it up to regulate the prices?
Um, okay, so if I can maybe share a few words, and please feel free, right? So I think if you're talking about from the economic, like the macroeconomic side, because I think there was part of that question was about that. There's a reason why animal products are cheaper than plant-based products. So in North America, right? I'll speak on North America. Government, there's a lot of government subsidies that go into animal agriculture, and so essentially, these farmers that raise animals for meat and dairy, they're subsidized heavily. They get a lot of money to keep prices low, so that oftentimes dairy milk will be cheaper than almond milk, for example. Although almond milk essentially is almonds in water that you can make at home, right? It's not a costly process, but there's a reason why dairy milk is cheaper than almond milk right now. And so there is a systematic change that needs to happen to make plant-based alternatives more readily available and affordable. As vegans and as vegetarians that are transitioning to veganism, one thing we can do is by beginning to support these different industries with demand, we can bring prices down and make a product more readily available. And so a lot of the
Right.
great opportunities, advancements in the food space that are happening in the vegan movement right now is because there's so much demand for it. So if you're a person that has like the privilege, right? And so I'll speak it in a very like narrow lens. But if you're a person that has privilege, that has like the ability to afford these products, I personally would spend an extra dollar to buy something that's more aligned with my values and aligned with animal welfare than spending $1 less knowing that an animal was hurt by this product. And so
Right.
for those that are not in that economic status and they're looking at prices and different things, I think
Mhm.
there's a few tricks and tips on how to be vegan on a budget as well. And so in North America, obviously you can buy plant-based alternatives. There's different brands. So some brands will be considered premium, pricey brands, like the very nice, like Yoko's, cream cheese, like really high quality stuff, right? And then there's other brands that are more economical as well.
Right.
And so, there's certain tips and tricks on how you can go vegan while saving money. I can say almond milk is almost comparable to dairy milk in terms of pricing in North America now. So it's almost the same price, certain restaurants, like the vegan burger is actually about the same price as the regular burger as well. And so like that price discrepancy is shrinking significantly in North America. And I think India is soon to follow. India's right next in line, because I think usually things will come to America and then within 1 to 2 years they'll come to India as well. And so these prices will shrink. So don't think that it will always be a expensive lifestyle. It is going to shrink. And there's more and more innovations happening in this space, which will make things more readily available. But yeah, Punch, if
Right.
you want to like share additional thoughts, please feel free.
So for me, animal rights is like the most important concept and something that I hold very dear to myself. So I've grown up with the idea that exploiting animals for irrespective of whatever the cause is wrong. But I was completely desensitized to the idea that cows and buffaloes are actually mothers. That's why they give milk, right? So we've always had this picture of, hey, there's a happy cow in the farm who's like eating and grazing and then giving us milk. So that was broken for me when I watched this documentary. And once I was sensitized to that, it was a simple statement, right? It was that if I'm drinking a glass of milk from another mother, her child, whose milk that rightfully is denied that. And that was what changed the entire perspective for me. So I, like a lot of other people, went vegan overnight. So I did that. But coming back to the topic of why there's a price discrepancy, right? So it's important to look at how Sunny talked about subsidiaries. That's one aspect of it. But another aspect is that, especially when it comes to like things like soy and corn, they are the basic feed that's fed to these animals when they are like, raising them. So that is why soy is priced a little higher and is inaccessible in certain areas, right? But when it comes down to the alternatives, what I personally do is, first of all, I don't personally like need a lot of milk. So, I mean, I haven't been a huge fan of that. But one thing that you can really, really do to cut down your cost and, of course, your carbon footprint also is that for me in India, a pack of 500 grams of soybeans comes in 50 rupees. Just 50 rupees. I get them. That gives me almost 3 to 4 liters of milk. I just get them, put in a blender with water, squeeze it out of a nut milk bag, and I'm sorted. So that's one thing you can try. I mean, almonds definitely can get a little expensive, but soy is one thing you can try. Then there is rice milk. Then there is like various other peanut milks. If you're not allergic, I am. So there's that you can try as well. But one thing that's important to also keep in mind is that the reason why these prices are higher is the dairy or any of these animal exploitation quote unquote industries would not stay afloat without the government backing them with subsidies and the consumers, being tricked into believing that there is a humane way to exploit animals. So I think that's pretty much the reason. But one tip that I would definitely give is just buy your own nuts, buy your own beans, blend them and make your own milk. I think that's so much more easier, right? And of course, it cuts down. It's very kind to the animals as well, so that works well. Okay, so we have another question which says, is there a humane way to exploit animals? So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, this is also a very common question. And just to give some context, right? When we're in these spaces, and so I'm kind of speaking on like the Global Jain Network, and we'll have these spaces about should we take from an animal by any means, right? And one of the conversations we'll have is like, what if we didn't do artificial insemination? We kept the cows with their calves. We kept everything humane, and it was a Jain-owned farm, and so animals treated so well. We let cows live to their old age, and so they give like every, like, and, obviously, this is an unrealistic scenario, right? But just in like this, just to play along with this idea that we did everything right, is it still okay for us to take from a cow? And I would say no, right? I would say it isn't okay. I think by any means, a cow, produces milk for its calf. And if we do any interference with that process, so whether we, take that, even if you say like there's additional cow, milk within the cow that we're just taking from the top, right? I think there's no justification to take from animals. And, my personal belief, and so I'm kind of speaking on myself, is that it was never okay. So even 100 years ago, even 1,000 years ago, it was never okay for us to take from a cow that rightfully belongs to the cow. And,
Right.
Every other aspect of our lives, the way we practice our faith and, even just like practice our lifestyle is centered around not hurting animals. This can't be an exception. We can't make one exception where, oh, but dairy's okay. It's something that isn't, we should just try to avoid it by any means. And I would say that because there's so many alternatives now, I think there's over 20 plant-based milks on the market right now. So 20 different milks, maybe not in every country, but they're definitely out there. I think we should begin embracing these other industries that doesn't even give you the chance to exploit animals. Because any industry that profits from animals, you have to expect there will be exploitation. So as long as, we're making money off an animal, you have to expect that there is going to be abuses.
Yes.
Especially if it's profit driven, right? So if I'm trying to make money, so here's another way to look at it, right? If I'm trying to make money, you want to get the most milk you can, right? So it's profit driven. It's not driven based on the animal being at the front of the conversation. So if it's profit driven, I need to make more milk. How do I make more milk? What we would do is we would inject the cow with hormones. We would separate the calf from the mother cow. We would do certain things so that we can get the most milk possible. demand is so high right now that you're not going to be able to meet demand. And so what are you going to do? You're going to maybe take a little bit of the milk, try to sell it. But even that, it just wouldn't be profitable. It wouldn't be sustainable, even as a business, from the business side. There's no way to do it, these businesses economically and still, be ahimsic about it. So it's just, unfortunately, there's no way to do it. I would be in that stance that there's 0% way to do it in that way.
I think I totally agree with you. And the only thing that we are entitled to take from animals are belly rubs and affection, nothing else. So that's pretty much what I wrote it down to. I think we are at a scenario where it's our responsibility to give back to the other more than human animals. That's what I call them, or non-human animals, if you prefer to say that way. So that is the only thing we're allowed to take from them. And there can be no humane way to exploit an individual who you can't even converse with, right? Because they can't consent and they wouldn't consent. Just think of yourself in their perspective, right? Would you want your reproductive system to be exploited that way? No. Would you want your child to be taken away? No. So would you want you to be slaughtered in a humane fashion? No. So that's pretty much what it falls down to. Once you put yourself in their perspective, that's all it takes for us to understand why we should extend that circle of compassion to them, right? So well said, Sunny.
And I think you said it perfectly, right? Like, cows can't speak, right? So how do you even get consent from a cow to take their milk, right? It's not, like, we can't live in an imaginary world where it's like a mutual symbol, because I know people say this often, right? That's like a mutual relationship. We provide like its home and we get its milk in return. And I said but we get our, her milk in return. But these are scenarios we're making in our own mind to justify that the cow wants us to take their milk. That isn't the case. We are forcefully taking milk from these cows this milk was made for their calves. Like, there's no, biologically, this milk was made for their calves. So anything that we do that takes from this animal, we're essentially stealing. We're stealing from the animal.
Absolutely. And ultimately what it boils down to is that they're sentient animals, right? They have motherhood, they have parenthood, they have friendships, and most importantly, they have the same amount of suffering, the degree of suffering that either me or you or anybody else would go through, right? And that is what it boils down to. If they can suffer, then stop the suffering. So absolutely. There's another question, which is, with the ESG framework coming up, I'm hoping it's a comment, more positive move towards vegan practices. So great. Any comments you have on that?
I think kind of goes back to that earlier point, right? That the more that we begin to, grow our community and support vegan businesses and products, the more change will happen. If you're within the ESG space, if you're within like the entrepreneurship space, right, starting a business, you have an opportunity to align your business with your values. And so there's an idea of both social impact and sustainability. And essentially, we're thinking about business ethics now and how can we do business in an ethical way, right? So, I guess for like the Jain space, right? If I'm a Jain business owner, I wouldn't sell meat, right? So as Jains that are vegetarian, like, you wouldn't have a restaurant that sells meat because it wouldn't be aligned with their values. So similarly, we want to think about dairy in the same way, that we want to have businesses that impact change without compromising our values.
Absolutely. Interesting. A really, really interesting question, which is, in fact, there are two. So they're from Sujay, who say, do you follow any communication technique for advocating for the animals?
Yes, we do. So we actually created this like whole mind map. And so essentially we have these different bubbles on our strategy for how we're going to target the Jain community, and like for the specific like conversation, but this can go for anything, right? And so the first method that I would recommend is leveraging virtual spaces. So we live in a very unique time right now. We just all went through a collective pandemic, and suddenly everyone's online. We know how to use Zoom, right? So suddenly, like, I didn't even know what Zoom was 2 years ago. Like, it was something that was not in my radar. But now we have like, Zoom events. We have Clubhouse, of course. So, that's, I think, such an awesome platform for those that use it. And so using these, like leveraging these technologies to have these conversations, I think is going to be really important for the vegan movement. So what we do right now is we regularly have panel-based events and we have open format events. So panel-based events we'll find like a few subject matter experts, we'll bring them to the stage, we'll have like a roundtable discussion, and then we'll allow people to ask questions. Very awesome way to have events. And we'll have events related to like vegan cooking. It could be vegan, like Jain Dharma and veganism. It could be about health, environment, and then maybe sub conversations within that space. We can also have open format conversations. So this could be more of, hey, we're a support system and we want to support you. So come to the stage, introduce yourself. We're here for you. And one I think a lot of people say that one of the most important things about that transition to veganism is having a support system, because you're obviously going through this very radical lifestyle change. You're changing everything that you know about food and the world you live in, and you're completely redoing that, right? When you look at the menu, suddenly there's certain ways to order at a restaurant, and you have to like relearn that again. Food at home, like when you do grocery shopping, like there's so many changes that are happening, and you're continuously being pressured by perhaps family members, perhaps friends. You're going out to a restaurant, and it's a lot you're going through, right? And so having a support system, I think, is really important for that transition. And a lot of people that, unfortunately, they weren't able to make that commitment to go fully vegan. A lot of times, the reason they aren't able to succeed is partly due to not having that support system. And so having like a virtual space, like through Clubhouse and Zoom, is like our way to recreate these spaces to show you that, hey, you may be the only vegan in your family or in your world, but hey, there's a lot of others out there as well. These are just like a few different strategies that I look at as like from an activist standpoint. But I think virtual world, taking full advantage of technology, I think it will be really important.
Absolutely. That was so expansive and insightful as well. A follow-up question is, since the entire crux of the faith is nonviolence, right? So how important is nonviolent direct communication while advocating for animals?
So I think it's very important that our fundamental principles are aligned with our practice. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we're facing right now, is that there's a severe disconnect, right? There's, and I say this critically, but I also say this out of like constructive, like to help the community as well, right? And so there's a professor, like a very like renowned professor that had made a comment about like the Jain community, which really much resonated. And the comment was that most Jains are vegetarian, but very few are vegans. Many Jains will wear silk, they'll wear wool, they'll use animal products during our pujas. At our temples, we use a lot of animal products there. At our weddings, we use a lot of animal products there. And that was just an observation he made. And he was absolutely right? Like, we can't be upset about that comment, because it is true that while we preach nonviolence and we're, even to the smallest being, we're trying to avoid hurting bugs and small animals. And we will fast for a week so that we can limit the violence we cause the world. Yet we're consuming so much dairy, right? It is just a severe disconnect between our principles and our practice. And I think it's very important that we make these distinctions and we have these difficult dialogues. Like, when it comes to activism and the nonviolent direct action, people will react a different way. So some people we'll talk to and we'll do activism, they're grateful. They're like, wow, thank you for letting us know about this, right? And it's just a wonderful moment when that happens, because they realize that our intentions are good and their intentions are good too. Like, we all want to help animals. And now that new information is out there, we need to evolve so that, based on this new available information. Some people will take it as an attack, right? Some people will take it as an attack on our religion. Some people, which it is not, right? It's we think of it as a extension of our application of the religion. Some people will think of it as an attack on their identity, right? Because dairy is so intertwined with our identity. I grew up with cows. Cows were like family members. How dare you say that I'm hurting animals, right? And no matter how nicely you say it, like, you will have those personalities. And when that time comes, I think it's, so I'm a little bit more strong in my approach, and others aren't, right? And no approach is right or wrong, but I'm okay with butting heads with strong personalities, because I don't think every interaction has to be positive. Like we wish it was, right? That we all walk out of this conversation more knowledgeable, grateful, thankful. Sometimes it's not like that, right? And personalities will bump heads. And there's I've lost friends from these conversations. When I say friends, not really friends, but acquaintances, right? To be honest, but they come off upset, and we'll say Machami Bukadam, right? Which is like in Jainism, it's like our way of saying I seek forgiveness, right? And it's like it's a beautiful thing we should always say, like, that, hey, I seek forgiveness if I knowingly or unknowingly hurt you. But even then, some people won't take that. But we try our best to be kind and you're polite, but you do want to stay firm and on your stay confident in your belief system, because if you're not confident and upfront, people will run you over. And we have like a lot of our vegan friends that get run over by people that talk louder than others, that they're okay with yelling and you're not okay with yelling. But you have to stay strong and know that there's others that are watching these conversations oftentimes, and they're looking at the whole like conversation. So even though you may think that, all right, he yelled, so he won, you're right, like quote unquote won. At the end of the day, I think you have positively impacted others that were just watching and they were onlooking. And so that would be my thoughts on that.
Perfectly well said. Because for me, if I am like unaware about something and I'm, probably you are aware about it and you're talking to me and you start screaming at me or you use like a blaming method, I would just be desensitized to it. I'll be like, hey, I don't want to talk to you anymore, right? And that's exactly what happens when you use like a violent action, violent behavior in your action. But again, it's important to be stern about it, like Sunny said, like you said. So being firm about what it is that you want to say, and make sure that the other person gets it through compassion. So Sunny, you mentioned a lot about how you're creating a support group for people to transition. So how can people like join in to the Global Jain Network?
I think step one is even just being in these spaces. So for those that are even listening in, like I'm so grateful for all of you, because that alone is the first step, is being in these conversations. When you make that decision that, hey, either now or sometime in the future, I want to, transition to a lifestyle that doesn't hurt animals, right? And I think, most of us either believe that or we hope that we can reach that point one day, right? And so once you make that step towards that decision, I think being a part of these conversations, these groups, I can say for me, so first I can speak on the Global Jain Network. So we'll attach a link on this where you can get involved, get connected with our groups. We have a specific Instagram group called the Jain Vegan Initiative, which is dedicated to just animal rights and within this intersection with Jainism. And in this page, and there's a lot of links for like different WhatsApp groups and places where you can be around other people. We will post conversations within the Jain community about veganism. Anytime a acharya or a monk speaks about veganism, we will post it. We'll make sure we post it. We are translating our languages into like Hindi and Gujarati. We are posting Jains talk about veganism. Which there's a lot of Jains that are. So if you're, I would say, and this is not like a scientific estimate, but if you had 10 Jains in a room, I think at least 2 of them would be vegan right now in the time we live in. And I know that sounds like a small number, but I think in like the greater mindset, that's a lot of vegans, right? And so countless Jains are going vegan right now in every part of the world. And and so there are Jains that are vegan right now.
Absolutely. So also do follow the Global Jain Network, follow the Jain Vegan Initiative. Those two are like great posts where I've seen a lot of posts where there are discussions, the documentaries, there are panel discussions, and there's definitely the aspect of breaking out festivals and how, they also, in a sense, promote the idea of compassion towards everybody. So please do go watch out for that. Sunny, I think this would be a very interesting and a very significant part of their entire life, which is how does one get started into this form of activism?
In this form of activism. Yeah. So oftentimes when we talk about like, affecting change, right? So like in the vegan spaces, we'll talk about individual change and like collective change, right? That's often a way to look at it. But I look at activism in 2 different stages. There's top-down approach, and then there's the bottom-up approach. And so the top-down approach is essentially people of influence, right? So this could be a Sunday school teacher. This could be a president of the Jain Temple. This could be, someone on the executive committee of our nonprofit organization, right? So if you're someone with the authority and the position to influence others, you can affect, systematic change from that level. And I think a good example of this is the Jain Center of Southern California that went completely vegan. It was because the president, I think one of our major donors and the president was vegan. And he pushed this idea that, hey, we need to go vegan. And because he was a person of authority and influence, he was able to make systematic change. And people will just follow underneath, they'll follow because of that whole conversation. If you're a Sunday school teacher, you have the ability to influence many people. You could be talking to like the kids, right? Like the kids that are learning about religion, and you can, incorporate the idea of animal welfare in there as well. And a great example of that is, Praveen Uncle within our Jain community. He actually wrote like the Sunday school books, right? Like that teach about Jainism, and he's a vegan. And so if you go like the page 1 of our Pachal books, it says it, all Jains should avoid dairy. It's right there, blatant. We're incorporating this into our religion at a very fundamental level. And so, we're just kind of planting the seeds, but this is something that a lot of Jains of big influences are trying to do. Even like, I would even speak on myself, right? So, the Global Jain Network, the Jain Vegan Initiative, we started our own group because some of the more traditional Jain organizations, they may be afraid of having certain conversations, right? Because a lot of these organizations are built on donations. They have to report to certain people. They have to make sure certain people are happy. As for the Global Jain Network, we are just a group of people who are very decentralized, and we're all willing to rock the boat as needed, right? So we're not afraid to rock the boat, to have these difficult dialogues. And we think it's for the betterment of our community. Like, we think this is the evolution of our community, is when smaller groups start evolving. And so, so even the Global Jain Network, we had this campaign called Give Up Dairy for Pajushan campaign. And Pajushan is like our very religious Holy Week of Jainism, where everyone's fasting. So everyone's already fasting. People are not drinking water. People are doing this, doing that. And so we're throwing like our own kind of, idea that, hey, we should give up dairy for Pajushan. And we have found that many Jains are going vegan because of like this. Like, most Jains that are vegan have went vegan during Pajushan. Like, so we're finding that, hey, there's this interesting like opportunity. So every year during Pajushan, we go really hard on that. So that is a top-down approach. Sorry, I realized I was rambling. The bottom-up approach is essentially grassroots efforts. This is talking to individual people. This is putting signs on the walls. And so, like, I think I hope they don't take this down. But so I'm a part of the Jain Society of Houston. And 3 years ago, when the Jain Center of Southern California went vegan, I created like a flyer that, hey, their temple went vegan. We should go vegan too, right? And I posted this flyer on the wall, like a bulletin wall at the Jain Society of Houston. And it's been there for 3 years. No one has taken it down. And so I don't even know how many people have walked by it and they've looked at it. It says vegan in big, bold letters, But that's an example of a bottom-up approach. And I think both approaches are equally important. So we want to get people of authority to make these changes. We need like individual people, like every person, every auntie, every uncle, they need to start talking about veganism. And together we can implement this systematic change towards veganism. And I'll just remind that I think, my opinion is the goal isn't to make every person vegan. The goal is to make enough people vegan so that we can affect change, whether it's within our community, whether it's our social structure, within the government. There's always going to be people that are, and I hate to say, but there's going to be people there's always going to be murderers in the world, right? There's always going to be bad people in the world, right? Like, we can never there's nothing we can do about that, right? But what we can do is we can make systematic change. We can make a cultural shift. We can make it that, hey, it is not okay to consume dairy by any means. And we want to make that the common thought. So if you consume dairy afterward, at least you know that, hey, there isn't a religion backing me up for this, right? And so, top-down approach, the bottom-up approach, I kind of incorporated into like the Jain community, but this applies to all communities. This applies to all like systems. So even like in the workplace, if you work at a company, very same thing, top-down approach, bottom-up approach. I think these are great like ways to look at activism.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Sunny. Any other thing that you want to mention before we close off for the live? And I have a couple of other questions which are like casual. So anything else that you want to talk? about
Yeah, no,
activism.
absolutely. No, and I love this conversation, and I can talk all the way, by the way. So thank you all for kind of like listening in and hearing me speak about this. I think, um, I'll kind of just reiterate that idea of activism. I think no matter who you are, right? So whether you're, someone from the younger generation, the older generation, whether you're a parent, a student, I think we all have an equal opportunity and a role to help animals. And activism doesn't have to always mean like a specific stereotype of what activism looks like, because you can even just talk to a friend, and that is a form of activism. It doesn't require you to be an expert. You don't have to be someone that's a subject matter expert. It doesn't have to be a profession. Anyone could be an activist. No one knows all the answers. We're all learning here. None of us would say that we know everything or we're not changing. Every day we'll continue to evolve our approaches. I'm learning something new every day from different activists as well. And I think that, we should all begin to look at it in that sense. You could be someone that starts a food blog, right? A vegan food blog. That is a form of activism, right? You share recipes. You could be someone that that is on the streets, that is protesting. Once again, I think that's a very effective form of activism, and I never want to discredit that. No matter what anyone thinks, I think it's so important that we have people like that as well. And it could be someone that's like me, hanging out online and just mass posting stuff in WhatsApp groups and doing that, right? We all have an equal role when it comes to helping animals, and really our goal is we want to just push the needle towards veganism. So however you do it, we appreciate you, we want you, and we thank you for everything that everyone's doing for this movement. And I also want to thank Bunch. If I get a chance, I just want to thank you for everything you're doing as well, because I've learned so much from our conversations on Clubhouse as well. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. I think a lot of people in the Global Jain Network, they haven't heard me speak. Some of them don't even know how I look, right? Like, they know me as a voice behind Clubhouse. So I think it's a great opportunity to reach out to even my audience as well, or our audience as well, and show them that, hey, this is something that we're really passionate about. Within our Jain community, we will continue to talk about veganism, right? We are not going to shy away. Our goal is we want to help the Jain community, and we want to have these difficult dialogues, right? And so we welcome everyone to be a part of our community and join us for this.
I'm extremely grateful for your food blog, because I just really enjoy the aesthetics of it, and it makes me drool every single time I watch it. So please do follow that account of Sunny as well. But most importantly, I think the Global Jain Initiative is such the Global Jain Network is such it's spread across. It involves both. It involves a top-bottom approach. It involves a bottom-up approach, and it's so expansive in its nature. Right? So I'm extremely grateful for the work that you've been doing, and please don't forget to go follow them. They would actually change your perspective about a lot of things. And there's a resource link pinned right in on the comments. So don't forget to go check out that as well. So I think it's really important for us to educate ourselves. And just like Sunny said, reiterating, it is never too late for you to be an activist. All that's going to take of you is to share across the message, a simple Instagram post, starting a conversation in your family, going out in the street and talking to other people, or getting online on social media, and then starting your own group and talking about it is some of the ways. And for all the others who are just getting started as activists, please don't shy away from either getting in touch with me or Sunny or anybody if you want to have some questions about activism or anything of that sort. So we'll be happy to have. Fantastic. So thank you so much, Sunny. I know it's been over an hour, but this has been such an insightful and such an intriguing conversation for me, especially. I'm sure for a lot of others as well. I'm immensely grateful for the work that Global Jain Network is doing, and I'm wishing you all the more strength and power for it. I'm looking forward to more and more discussions, even on Clubhouse, even on otherwise. So again, a quick reminder, don't forget to follow the Global Jain Network and the Jain Vegan Initiative. It would open your perspective about a lot of things. So just really glad that we could have this conversation, Sunny. It's been a great time conversing with you ever since I first met you, and even now it's good to see you as well. So thank you so much. Just really glad.
No, and I just want to thank you as well. Thank you for this opportunity. Really grateful to have these conversations, and I know there's so many people that have joined us today that may have not known about this, or maybe are listening to these conversations for the first time. And really grateful. Thank you all again for being a part of this, and also follow Bunch as well. Let me make sure I say that, because Bunch's Instagram page is doing incredible work. She's had multiple conversations like this with different people, and I think this is a great opportunity for us, whether, whichever community you're from, to learn about how we can help animals. Because I think that is our ultimate goal that brings us all together.